Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with this morning's session of the Civil Justice Subcommittee. Madam Clerk, will you take the roll, please?
Representative Carter, Clemens, Curcio, Garrett, Griffey, Ogles, Parkinson, Ramsey, Chairman Farmer.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, this is going to be our last meeting. Does anybody have anything they'd like to make, any comments about anyone here, make any personal orders or such? And I'll allow for afterwards as well. But Chairman Curcio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say thank you for your leadership this year, and it's been a pleasure getting to work with you on this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let's do. Oh, Representative Clemens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a brief comment about how the importance of our legislation that comes through our committee process. You've done a great job this year, but legislation does have consequences, and it's hard for me to go without mentioning the fact that one of our hometown papers here in town, the front page is covered with gun violence, not only at a high school in Knox County, but violence here in North Nashville, where a 2-year-old child was killed, a 3-year-old child was shot. And then in my hometown and Ms. Farmer's hometown, a woman and her daughter were literally hunted down and shot in a domestic violence situation in their own yard. And I would love for us as a body to take into consideration the impact of our legislation and the message we send to the residents of Tennessee. And just briefly, I do want to, I didn't know any of the people involved in these, but I will say that none of those people, this is a Civil Justice Committee, this is not the Criminal Justice Committee, but none of the victims are ever going to, or their families are going to see true justice as a result of this gun violence. But I want to take a moment and point out and mention one lady who I did have the pleasure of knowing, Ms. Deborah Sisko, or Debbie to her friends, was the president of CWA Local 3808. She was a resident of Lebanon, Tennessee. Had the pleasure of knowing her and her family and their extended family growing up in Lebanon. And, you know, you don't become the president of a labor union local just because you're nice or because you're a good leader or you're smart, but it's because you care about people and working families. And she did that, and she fought every single day on behalf of working families. So I would love to just acknowledge the passing of Ms. Sisko, and ask for my colleagues again to consider the impact of the legislation that we pass up here. Thank you very much.
And thank you for that, Representative Clemens. And members, let's take a moment of silence for Ms. Sisko and those others that were mentioned in the gun violence. I know Knoxville and Lebanon. Let's just take a moment of silence for those folks and remember those folks. Thank you. Members, anyone else? Okay. Dr. Ramsey, Representative Ramsey, you recognize.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I got to admit, I'm a total neophyte at justice committees of any kind. I always feared being routed into one of the justice committees, and because I knew so little about it. I didn't request highly to be on here, but now that I've been on here and seen your skill and your dedication to the philosophy of justice, I do appreciate the importance of it, and I appreciate the job that you've done this year. I'm very impressed and with all of you, and appreciate you very much. And I do like the billboard I get to see every time that I'm on the way home. So,
just for you, Doctor. Thank you. It's a team effort here, members. We all know that. Every year we work hard to get good policy passed, and certainly, as Representative Clemens said, you know, whatever we do, we want it to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens in the state of Tennessee and beyond. So, and thank you for those comments, Representative Clemens. They're well taken, and every one of us want to accomplish the same goal. So thank you so much for those. All right, members, we have a regular calendar this morning. Item 1, that's House Bill 1219. That's by Representative Lynn. She's not here right now, so without objection, I'm going to roll that to the hill of today's calendar. That'll be the regular calendar. There's only 4 items on there, so without objection, item 1, House Bill 1219, rolled to the hill of today's calendar. That brings us to item 2, House Bill 357 by Chairman Curcio. And you're properly recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I have an amendment that I'd like to move, and it should be the second one that you received. It's amendment coded 6930.
Second.
Thank you, committee. Members, this rather lengthy amendment seeks to create some very needed judicial resources across our state. As we know, every year we receive a weighted caseload study that describes the need in our judiciary. So sections 1 through 7 reflect the need for new trial courts in several of our judicial districts, as evidenced by the weighted caseload study I just talked about. While no new study will be released this year due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, I looked at the weighted caseload data that we've received over the past 6 years and corrected for the new trial courts we've created over that time, and then I averaged the numbers to identify the judicial districts with the most need. So the 19th judicial district, comprised of Montgomery and Robertson counties, has the greatest need and would receive 2 judges under this plan. And then the following judicial districts would each receive 1 judge. So judicial district number 4, which, Mr. Chairman, I think is near and dear to your heart, includes Cott, Granger, Jefferson, and Sevier counties. District 12, District 13, District 22, which includes Murray County, which is a county that I represent. District 23, which includes some area that Representative Griffey and I also represent, and then Judicial District 30, which is Shelby County as well. So sections 8 and 9 reflect the need for increased positions and funding for the newly created 32nd Judicial District, which we've been working very hard to make sure that that rural community has equal access to justice. So sorry for the lengthy explanation, but I want to make sure everybody knew what we were doing today. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
And thank you. And does that amendment make the bill, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. Members, do we have any questions on the bill? Okay. I'm sorry. Hold on. I saw Representative Clemens. He had his hand up. You're recognized, sir, and I'll get right back.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer once we add this to the bill, or ask once we add this to the bill, or I can ask about the amendment either way.
Thank
since
you.
it
Well, the
makes-
question's been called on the amendment. All those in favor of adopting House Amendment 6930 to House Bill 357, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Ayes have it.
No.
Now we're back on the bill as amended, and Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if, sorry, what is the 32nd Judicial District?
Mr. Chairman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. 32nd Judicial District is a newly created district that includes Hickman, Lewis, and Perry County, and it'll go into effect in 2022.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized, sir.
Okay, and I know we've got caseload data, and I'm all for creating more judges. I know that most of our judges are overworked, and this, more judges expedites the judiciary process and access to justice, so love that. But are we worried at all about creating these judges in counties before we have all the census data and have a full picture of what the real needs are going to be in any of these counties? Or do you feel like the caseload data we already have is sufficient?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand now the nature of your question. So no, this bill does not create a new judge in the 32nd Judicial District. It just corrects some salary changes that were made. So as you know, when you file a bill, it gets assigned a fiscal note. And so fiscal review, when they created the positions that were necessary to staff the 32nd Judicial District, they just have to pick a number. So they peg everybody basically at a level 5 salary level. And in reality, there's folks that have been working there for 25 years. They're at a level much, much higher than that. So what this does is just reflects the salaries of the folks who are currently working there that they're already making, but doesn't create a new judge for the 32nd. They've got one.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I changed subjects on you. So I'm looking at all the districts across the board. You referenced the caseload data that we have, and we've been studying for years. I know, or some of y'all have, who've been on this committee for longer than I. But we're also about to get some pretty substantive census data at the end of July. I think that may alter, we're going to see a major decrease in population in some of our rural counties. So my question was, do you think that we're getting out in front of this before we have the full picture, or do you think the caseload data that we have currently is sufficient to choose which of these districts are getting new judgeships?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think it's sufficient. If you see where we're adding judges here, they're not the areas that are really losing population in the state. I mean, you look at Murray County, which has grown exponentially. You look at, city of Clarksville, Montgomery County, that's where they need 2 judges. They're the biggest need in the state and have been for years. And then, in my area, around Dixon, Houston, Humphreys, and Stewart County, again, seeing all that growth of folks coming to Nashville and kind of bouncing off the perimeter and going and buying farms and that kind of thing. So really, these are the areas that are seeing the population growth. And then, of course, not to forget the 30th district, which is our colleague, Representative Parkinson, down in Shelby County. So these aren't exactly the areas that are shrinking.
Representative Clements, you're
Yeah, thank you. And I noticed, there's a lot of these rural counties in here, but every district has a anchor tenant, so to speak, with a pretty populated county. So I just wanted to make sure we got that on the record. And then my last question is, we're expediting this into effectiveness of September 1st of this year. Why aren't we just waiting to allow the voters to choose their judges rather than having to go through or allowing the governor to appoint all these judges when we could just wait a year and elect the judges to fill these seats rather than having all that turnover and creating all that additional bureaucratic or administrative headache for some of these judgeships?
Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This mirrors the process we go through when there's a judicial vacancy. So you're creating a new judgeship, the governor appoints, and you rock on. And it also expedites justice in those areas. Again, we talk about Clarksville, Montgomery County up there, and they've been waiting for years. And, they need relief today. They really needed it yesterday. And I get letters and calls every single year as soon as we come into session from these judges and folks who work in those courts saying, please, the weighted caseload study has said we've been deficient for years and years and years. Do not delay. So this would just allow that to happen as quickly as possible. And again, it follows the exact same process as we do if there's a vacancy and the governor appoints.
Representative Clements.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I mean, I understand what the vacancy, but we're creating, this isn't a vacancy, this is a creation of new positions and new judgeships. And, the governor appointing one member, a judge here, one member there. I mean, this is the equivalent of court packing. You're talking about 7, if my count's right, trial judges across the state of Tennessee in one swing by one governor. I mean, it's pretty shocking. I mean, I would even rather, if we're looking at the expedition of the judicial process, I mean, I would rather even have special elections in August for some of these. I have real concerns about the governor being able to appoint this many judges at one time and creating that additional bureaucratic hurdle for elections next year and any turnover that may result. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Curcio, any follow-up?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Chairman Curcio for bringing this legislation. I fully support it. It's fully needed. I sat through I think I made just about every one of the judicial redistricting conferences, and want to again thank the judges and the chancellors who sat on that, and all the other individuals from the various departments and judicial branches throughout the state, whether it's prosecutors and so forth, and victim witness coordinators to talk about the needs of judicial system going forward. There is clearly, in my assessment, most people, their biggest interaction with the state of Tennessee may very well be in our court system, other than maybe the road system. But when you're dealing with the state of Tennessee, it's a court system. And that's where people are seeking justice because they've either been a victim of a crime or seeking justice because they felt like they've been mistreated under the law and are seeking redress. And I think one of the most stellar examples of why America is as great as it is because we have set up a system and insist upon that we settle our differences civilly. without taking violence into our hands and harming other persons and innocent people and damaging their property. So I want to commend Chairman Curcio again for bringing this. I fully support it. I would share with my concerns with my good friend from Davidson County that citizens also want our judicial system to be as free as possible from politics. They don't want politics interfering with how our judicial system functions as much as possible. We are a political society and creation, and that's how we operate. But so when you have Nashville making decisions on appointments to judicial thing, I think it actually tends to somewhat cause people to have concerns. I think it's better if you allow the development of who people want to be their judges and chancellors, if that's from an organic grassroots base. But I fully support this legislation. Thank you, and happy to support it. Thank you.
And thank you. Members, anyone else? And I would like to say, I think that now more than ever, especially the counties or the judicial districts that have been running short on judges, need them more than ever, because coming out of a pandemic and having the court backlog that we have, I think the state's going to save a significant amount of monies for those folks who are sitting in our jails and our prisons, having the judges there to get them through the system, get them out, get them on probation, becoming productive members of society. And also to the court packing statement, I want to remind everyone that these are trial court positions. We're not adding 7 state Supreme Court positions on here. So I consider our trial courts of law and order. You know, people coming in, as Representative Griffey said, you know, maybe had been charged with vandalism or theft or selling delivery or something like that. I mean, these courts aren't asking political questions of these folks. They're just looking at them for who they are and what they've been accused of for the human being that they are, not for their political party. So let's just remember, these are trial court positions. These are not Supreme Court positions, and these are courts of law and order. So I appreciate you bringing this legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those comments.
Thank you. Members, anything else before you vote? Question's been called on the bill. Looks like we're ready to vote to send House Bill 357 as amended to the Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on. And that brings us to item 3. That's House Bill 1472 by Representative Ogles. I had signed on to that and was going to carry that for Representative Ogles, but it looks like it's been general subbed in the Senate. So that means it's likely not going anywhere, and this bill is really important to Representative Ogles. So what I'd like to do, members, is just make a motion, if we could, to move this to the first calendar next year for him. That way he can pick this up and run with it. So, any objection? Seeing none, without objection, let's send House Bill 1472 to the first calendar next year. So moved. And that brings us to item 4, and that's my bill. If I could have Representative Curcio. There you go.
Second.
And members, what I'd like to do, there's 2 amendments on there. So I have the bill, and the amendment 6931 rewrites and makes the bill.
Members, you've heard the motion.
Excuse me. Let me do that.
Yeah, Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
I'm so sorry. So Amendment 60.
7. I believe it's 6071 is what I have in dashboard. Is that the one you wish to move?
Hey, if we could, Mr. Chair, could we take a 3-minute recess?
Without objection, we'll take a 3-minute recess. Members, thank you for your patience. Our 3-minute recess is over. We will now go back in session. We're in session. We're, as a reminder, we're on item number 4, which is House Bill 1130 by Chairman Farmer. Chairman Farmer, you have a motion and a second, and I believe you were going to move an amendment. Do you know which one that is?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move Amendment 6071, and that amendment makes the bill.
All right, we've got a motion to move amendment coded 6071 and a second. All those in favor of attaching amendment coded 6071 to House Bill 1130, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, you adopt. Chairman Farmer, you're recognized to explain your bill as amended.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, what this bill does, this creates a statewide chancery court. And in my view, it would operate almost like our Court of Criminal Appeals or Court of Appeals. What it would do is it would create a 3-panel court. And this would include a chancellor out of the Eastern Grand Division, the Middle Grand Division, and the Western Grand Division. And this panel of judges would then hear constitutional issues with regards to the state would be brought to them. And they would hear those issues and make those rulings and act off of majority basis. So if they hear something and 2 judges concur and 1 dissents, then that's something that the majority would prevail. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's just a brief 10,000-foot view of what this bill does, and I move passage.
Thank you, Chairman Farmer, for that explanation. Members, do we have any questions for the sponsor? Representative Clemens, you recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman Farmer, how's this going to interact with the legislation that we just came through this committee from Representative Garrett, I believe, introduced something along these lines?
Okay.
Chairman Farmer, you recognize.
And thank you for that question. That's something that Chairman Garrett and myself are currently in conversations of, and I think that there are some potential conflicts within our legislation, and I don't believe it's anticipated that we would bring both bills to the House floor and request passage.
Okay.
Representative Clemens, you recognize.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Gives me a better understanding. And also, I can't help but note, you just gave a very eloquent and well-stated defense of our trial courts on the last bill, and talks about how they're not, political. They're just trying the cases in front of them. And that's currently what's happening right now in the Davidson County Chancery Courts. Cases are randomly assigned. Chancellors adjudicate the case before them with exclusive jurisdiction over the types of claims contemplated by this legislation. And yet, here we are with a second piece of legislation that seems pretty reactive, in my subjective opinion, to not agreeing with the outcome of cases in the past year or case in the past year. So I don't understand the need for essentially creating a court of appeals at the trial court level. I mean, isn't this what the Court of Appeals is for? And the very nature of this bill is precisely what the Court of Appeals does following the trial court?
Chairman Farmer, you recognize, sir.
And thank you for that question, Representative Clemens. I know there's language here. This court is not designed to be a court of appeals, okay? It actually says if there is an appeal out of this statewide court, the Court of Appeals shall have jurisdiction of appeals from decisions from the statewide chancery court. So we're not taking or try to usurp any authority or power from our current Court of Appeals. I think the idea behind this is to set up a statewide court that would represent fairly the eastern, the middle, and the western portions of our state as a whole, instead of having one portion of our state hear something. So I think the idea and the argument's been, well, why can't Davidson County hear this? Why can't Sevier County hear this? Why can't Shelby County hear this? Well, let's fix this. Let's allow every grand division of the state to have an opinion, and then put it together and see what comes out.
Representative Clemens, you wish to be recognized?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate that response, but that's precisely what the Court of Appeals is. So regardless of who's going to have jurisdiction over these claims of a constitutional nature or administrative or executive order, I mean, you literally just described the Court of Appeals. It made up of members from a grand divisions. So I have concerns, but I want to skip ahead to ask kind of logistic questions of Where, I think I saw in this amendment that the cases are going to be heard in Davidson County, or they're going to be housed in Davidson County. Is that accurate?
Chairman Farmer, you recognize.
Yes, it is.
Representative Clemens.
And is there going to be comparable appropriation of funds for additional office space for these statewide chancellors? Are they going to be in our courthouse, or is there going to be a special venue? How's that going to work? And where's the clerk and master going to be for this Chancery Court?
Chairman Farmer.
It is my understanding that as long as Davidson County will cooperate with what we do, that these courts will be held here in the Davidson County Courthouse, downtown Nashville, and that the clerk and master for this court would be also housed here in Davidson County.
Okay, and then
Representative Clemens.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, sorry. And then you referenced the elections will be in compliance with 17-1103, and that references the appellate courts as well as the trial courts. Is this an appointment that's going to be a judgeship that's going to be an appointment and then a yay or nay vote for retention every 8 years, or is this going to be elected within the Grand Division itself every 8 years as a popular vote?
Chairman Farmer, I'll give you just a moment to confer if you need to, but you're recognized.
And I just wanted to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to be sure that I was going to answer this correct. So, okay, and that's what I thought. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to confer with legal just to be sure of my answer. This will be an appointment that will coincide with the judicial terms by the governor initially. And then once these terms are over, these judges will run statewide.
Representative Clemens.
So again, the governor's going to appoint these 3 individuals, I suspect, for an 8-year term before they're ever up for retention. So again, and I know you'll disagree with this statement, but again, it's a court packing instance by a court of very important types of appeals. So regardless of the 3 divisions aren't necessarily going to be represented. The governor is going to be represented, his wishes, for 8 years before any citizens have the opportunity to choose these judges. And that's a sincere concern of mine.
Chairman Farmer, do you have any response to that?
I do not. I just move passage.
Chairman Farmer has moved passage. Any further questions for the sponsor of the bill? Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Farmer, for bringing this legislation. Look, I think this bill addresses the concerns that, 94 other counties may have when it comes to who gets to hear the cases challenge the constitutionality of a state statute or state officials' actions or something like that. There's 94 counties, and Davidson County was originally picked historically out of convenience because Nashville was here and so forth. That doesn't mean that Nashville, Davidson County should have the exclusive say-so over who gets to initially hear these cases. And my good friend from Davidson County, I'm sure is well aware, whoever the trial judge in a case, the trial judge is oftentimes has more power and authority and outcome determinative aspect on a case than Court of Appeals or Supreme Court justices, because so much of their analysis and reasoning is driven by stare decisis case precedent. The trial judge has to decide what the initial facts are and findings, and those findings are generally given deference. So the trial judge has a lot of power, and I think this is a fair way to give all the 95 counties an opportunity to select who they want to be the chancellors to hear these initial challenges. And I think this is a fair approach, and I support it. I thank you for bringing the legislation.
Thank you, Representative Griffey. Any further questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. All those in favor of sending House Bill 1130 to civil full, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
The ayes have it. If you wish to be recorded as a no, please indicate with the clerk. Members, that concludes our regular calendar, but I'm going to hand the gavel back to Chairman Farmer for our special.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for handling that for us. That brings us back to item 1 by Representative Lynn. I do not see her. That's House Bill 1219. So without objection, and it's been a good 45 minutes now, I'm going to make a motion to move that to the first calendar of next year. Second. Seeing no objection, House Bill 1219, first calendar next year. That brings us down to our special calendar. Item 1 on that special calendar is House Bill 518 by Representative Bricken, I believe, and that's been asked to be sent to the clerk's desk. Any objection? Seeing none, House Bill 518 to the clerk's desk. That brings us to item 2 by House Bill 902 by Chairman Doggett. Second. And sir, you got a motion in a second, and just wanted to make mention, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to you before the committee on this, but it is my understanding that Representative Terry has a bill that is in calendar and rules, currently in calendar and rules, that does what your bill seeks to do. And you're recognized.
Chairman Terry and I have spoken about this. His applies to federal, mine is state and local. So they're two different bills.
Fair enough. And like I said, it's my understanding, and
Right.
my understanding was wrong.
Sure, hey,
So
no
there
problem.
you go. Wasn't trying to derail your legislation. So
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You've got a motion and a second on your bill. Looks like we had taken up this matter on March the 30th and adopted Amendment 4577. Do you still want to move forward with that?
I actually, Mr. Chairman, have an untimely filed amendment. And if you would, I don't know if you permit me to speak about it or not.
Members, in the posture we're in, this is our last meeting, and I know we're running up, but people's running around different committees trying to run their legislation and do the things they need to do. So I'd take a motion to take Chairman Doggett's untimely filed amendment. Motion. Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Ayes have it. So
Thank you.
and that amendment is House Amendment 6996. Is this something you'd like to move forward with?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right. Got a motion and a second, and you're properly recognized.
Thank you. So as we've discussed previously last month about this registry, it's called the Second Amendment Privacy and Protection Act. This legislation defines what a registry is. It also, for that purpose of stating what you can and cannot do, and there's exceptions in there. What the untimely filed amendment did was, working with the various departments, we've learned through our process of going through this legislation that there are some state and local entities, there are lists of things that need to be kept for the purposes of inventory, for the purposes of evidence collection. Recently learned that the Post Commission has to keep a list of officers who perhaps in their local jurisdictions, the local entities cannot provide their handguns for them, and so those local officers have to do that out of their own pocket. And in doing so, the Post Commission has to keep a record of that solely for the purposes of that, I guess, liability protections. And also for LEOSA, which is the retired law enforcement officers, whatever firearms that they qualify with, they have to keep a record for that. So that's the provision that we added in, was adding Post in. Previously, we had Department of Corrections in there and issues dealing with the Department of Safety as well.
Very good. Members, any questions for Chairman Doggett on House Amendment 6996? And does it make the bill?
Yes, sir, it does.
And it does make the bill. Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see a lot of exclusions in here, and I appreciate you making those amendments for practical purposes. What is this contemplated to prevent outside of these exclusions?
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
It is to prevent a state or local entity from compiling a list or creating a registry just for the sole purpose of knowing who has firearms and firearms accessories in our state. It also prevents a state or local entity from sharing or reporting that information to the federal governments for the sole purpose of sharing that information of a created registry.
Any follow-up, Representative Clemens?
Yeah, and so is there a municipality or local government doing this at this time that is an example? I'm trying to get my head around what we're preventing here.
Chairman Doggett?
No, sir, like I stated in our last meeting, this is merely preemptive. What we're doing here is we're defining what a registry is for preemptive purposes going forward, but there is none to my knowledge at this time that has done this.
Representative Clemens?
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, if there were background checks required, would this frustrate the intent of federal background check legislation or state-based background check legislation?
Chairman Doggett.
Background checks are perfectly legal now. This is, that would not have any effect from this legislation.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Representative Griffey, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Doggett, for bringing this legislation. As I understand it, and this is a question, what this would do would prohibit any state law enforcement officer, local law enforcement officers or entities, state officials, agents, from recording who has what firearms, what citizens have it, and then providing that to the federal government if there's, say, an executive order from this administration or if there's legislation passed by this Congress that would require identifying who owns what weapons or whatever. And this would just say, well, if y'all do that, our local law enforcement, state and local law enforcement officers and entities are not going to be doing any of that work. Y'all are going to have to do it on your own. Is that a fair understanding?
Chairman Doggett.
That's a fair understanding, and I'd also add to that there, even without any type of legislation or executive orders from the federal government or from future administrations, that, you know, we're defining what the registry is and what cannot be done in our state going forward.
Very good. Representative Griffey?
And just to follow up, it's my understanding the background check for the purchase of a firearm is a federal requirement under federal law and actually goes through federal databases, so that this wouldn't have any impact on that.
Chairman Doggett.
No, sir, it would not.
Very good. Members, just a reminder, we're still on the amendment, so any other questions on House Amendment 6996? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote to adopt House Amendment 6996 to House Bill 902. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Now we're back on the bill as amended. Any questions on the bill before we vote? Seeing none, looks like we're ready to vote. Send House Bill 902 as amended to Civil Justice Full Committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Bill moves on.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
You're welcome. That brings us to item 3 by House Bill 409 by Representative Lafferty, and he has joined us. Thank you, sir. And you've got a motion. Okay. And I'm sorry, Bill dies for lack of a second.
Second.
Thank you. That brings us to item 4, House Bill 1023 by Representative Potts, and that's been requested to be sent back to the clerk's desk. Any objection? Seeing none, House Bill 1023 is sent back to the clerk's desk. And members, that, I believe, concludes our calendar for today, our final calendar. And I want to thank everyone that has served on this committee, that has helped this committee move forward this year. It's been a pleasure serving and working with every person in this room each week. We may not always agree, but at the end of the day, we're all hopeful to come out with good policy and good legislation that benefits our districts and Tennesseans and all those surrounding our state. So, seeing no further business, the Civil Justice Subcommittee is closed, subject to the call of the chair.